There was nothing more regal than seeing a state police officer patrolling on horse around the Capitol. But the unit had humble beginnings, with officers providing all of their own equipment and training.
We didn't really have too much of a direction to follow. We were kind of left to our own devices. They were started by an officer who had some knowledge of horses, but not really police officers on horses. And after spending some time in the unit, we met officers from San Francisco PD who have been in business since 1874, and so we started to pay attention to how they did things.
The fledgling unit knew that a mounted equestrian officer was a great public relations tool, but they proved to their peers that horses and protesters are a great mix as well.
We had a rally that occurred in Capitol Park that we finally saved the day with the horses and actually stopped the crowd from moving forward. And when we went into the briefing, and we got a standing ovation basically by the officers, and a debriefing afterwards. You know, they got up and said, "You guys did a good job, and you're part of the team," and it just made you feel good that, you know, we put all that work and training into it, and, you know, we did it finally, and we got the support of our peers.
For me, was the sort of the watershed moment was when we the mounted unit officers went from providing all of our own equipment, saddles, trucks, and trailers, to having state issue. It sort of was like the bona fides. We'd arrived, you know. I could drive a state vehicle that I could tell some other guy, hey, it needs tires.
As the need for agility emerged, a bike patrol was added to augment state police patrols. Bike officers could often get there faster, maneuver in tight traffic, and offer quick assistance to citizens. One of the state police agency's proudest responsibilities was the protection of the state's constitutional officers. The Protective Services Unit, or Dignitary Protection, started in 1968, when then-Governor Ronald Reagan hired a former Secret Service agent who had protected him during his first run for president. That agent's name was Ed Hickey.
Reagan liked him, and they struck up a friendship. I guess they're both Irishmen. And as I got to know both of them, they, you know, swapping jokes and stuff, but Reagan hired him. And so Hickey brought the sophistication of the Secret Service to the state police. When I started, we would go back to the Secret Service school in Maryland, basically Washington, D.C., for training.
Charged with full-time physical security for California's first family, the unit was cohesive, well-trained, and adaptable, which they had to be when a man named Jerry Brown became governor.
You never knew where you're going to be sleeping the next night in San Francisco, L.A. It was a lot of hours, and it did interfere with family lives. Like I said, we loved it. He would ditch us occasionally, but we knew all of his regular hangouts, and we'd eventually catch up with him.
The unit was the shadow of not only the governor, but some legislators and state officers. And the danger was not only at public events in crowd situations.
September 1980, that's when a gentleman drove into the Capitol basement wearing a suit, driving a brand new rental car. It was before we had kiosks at the driveways, and he drove in, and the officer in the basement at the time was Bill Kinch, who had been assigned to the basement for various reasons, but he decided to make lemonade out of lemons, and he made sure that he knew every member that belonged down there, and he knew this guy didn't belong. And we were up in our office right at the top of the stairwell on the first floor, and we heard the shout, and then we heard a gunshot, and we heard a crash. And myself, your dad, Ken Maynard, I'm not sure who else, maybe Al, maybe Art, ran down the stairwell, and we came out with our guns drawn, and here was Officer Kinch, who'd been hit by the car, in shock, and we effected the arrest of this gentleman. And we weren't sure what was up at the time, but turns out the guy had an appointment to see the governor's press secretary. He had a rifle and a long stem flower box in the trunk of his car. He had cards printed up, "Bang, you're dead."
When they weren't protecting, they were training. By 1976, the California State Police Protection of Public Officials course, or POPO, was considered mandatory for police officers from agencies throughout the nation and around the world.
We've had them from Hong Kong, Canada, Mexico, Great Britain. I mean, I think we've spanned the globe with our training.
The methods developed by the California State Police are still utilized by the California Highway Patrol today.
When they say, ladies and gentlemen, the governor of the great state of California, you still get a little chill when they say it every time. Or I've had the fortunate pleasure of being in the presence of the president, and the same thing. So it's a little adrenaline rush, and to know that you're part of it and doing your job.
Finally, state police detectives formed the state's first Bureau of Investigation.
We handled all kinds of cases, from robbery, rapes, murders, death investigations, and we also took over investigations for other agencies, Franchise Tax Board, whoever needed us, employment officers that had fraudulent cases, and anybody else, Caltrans, who had people under the influence of narcotics and so forth. We would handle their investigations and do their investigations.
I had the most wonderful group of guys working for me. They would do anything, long hours, hard work, long hours of surveillance. It was absolutely the best.
Modeled after the FBI, the detectives of the state police investigated crimes on state property and coordinated with other agencies to investigate and solve crimes.
A case in Northern California could easily end up in Southern California, and they would transport that information to us. We had a $250,000 computer stolen from Caltrans out of Sacramento, and it was recovered in Los Angeles by David Flores, Detective David Flores, and apprehended the suspects involved. We had to coordinate all the time. But people move around and they try to skip down and so forth. And it worked well. It was a good cohesive unit.
We had to be generalists, so we handled anything from petty crimes to all the way up to homicides. But I think probably the most satisfying one, if I had to pick one, there was a female employee of the Capitol that was raped and stabbed multiple times in the greenhouse. And it took about a year and a half for the information to come in from outside Baltimore, Maryland, and interagency cooperation, and that crime was finally solved after a year and a half. We brought the original investigator, Jerry Leffenwell, back, and he was able to help.
For more than 100 years, the state police evolved with the needs of the citizens of California.
One of the things I loved about the state police was that it was the only law enforcement agency in state service that was general law enforcement. We did a little bit of everything. We were like a hybrid. We were known, you might call us the governor's executive police force. We were considered his personal agency. In addition, we had a special mission. Besides our statewide jurisdiction, we had a special mission which was to service the state agencies throughout the state.
Even at the height of the agency's dominance, only 468 officers patrolled the entire state. It is rare for an agency so widespread to also be so tightly knit.
You literally had to be Hercules or Superman because you were always by yourself. So you had to be a little bit smarter than the average cop because your backup was, it wasn't going to be your own agency most of the time. It was going to be an allied agency. So you didn't want to get into a problem unless you really knew what you were doing. So you had to be a little bit smarter, a little bit sharper, in my opinion.
Oh, we had lots of fun. We played pranks on each other, and we had our downtime when we had our fun.
I worked with some of the best people in law enforcement with the state police. They underpaid, underappreciated, but they worked hard. They played hard, but they were really great. Whatever success I've had, I owe to them. I really mean that.
The agency was truly an extended family.
We were a family. You had that sense when you joined, how everybody gathered around you, made you feel like you belonged.
Through violent protests, terrorist threats, attacks on the Capitol, and attacks on public officials, 3 officers were lost in the line of duty during the agency's more than 100 years of existence. And while each of those losses were deeply felt, it is a testament to the safety procedures and the training that more officers were not lost through its history. And when that history drew to a close and the California State Police merged with the California Highway Patrol, the men and women of the state police proudly took their history and their skills to the new agency.
On a personal level, I was sorry to see it absorbed. I had 23 years in. I was planning on spending the rest of my career there. Don't get me wrong, the time with Highway Patrol was good. It was challenging, and I enjoyed it, but I was sorry to see the agency I had joined no longer exist.
It was something bigger than what I expected, and I really enjoyed it, and especially working with these guys that were my family.
One of the things that I'm pleased about is the state police lives on in the CHP. And eventually, we're all hoping that someday one of the reasons for the merger was that at some point in time, the CHP will be performing the entire mission that the state police did. And who knows, there might even be a name change someday. I'm hoping that someday they'll change the name of the CHP to the state police or the state patrol to signify a full service agency. And that's hopefully coming sometime in the future.
The pride felt by California State Police officers could be seen from the very first officer to the very last day of the agency's existence. The motto inscribed on every patch worn said it all: dedicated to service. And that is the legacy of the California State Police.